Hi, I'm C.H. Williams. I've been getting a lot of questions recently about how to write trans characters, and I've been having a lot of really wonderful conversations about including trans folks in fantasy narratives. And I want to share that with you today. Now, what it all comes down to is not having a trans inclusive fantasy world is a flaw in world building. At the end of the day, that is the takeaway from this video. If your world does not accommodate trans people, your world building is inadequate. Now, the first question that I always ask people when they talk about having a trans character is, what is it like to be a trans character and transition in your world? I use my own transition IRL just to sort of gauge how this goes. So I ask about HRT. What access do they have to hormone replacement? Is it going to be actual hormones? Are they going to go down to a chemist and get a vial? Are they going to go to some magic practitioner in the woods and get some sort of tonic or poultice? What does that look like? How are they going to go about that? Is it accessible? If it's not accessible or not affordable, why? That's a very important question in this. Why have you crafted a world in which either medically or magically transitioning is inaccessible? That absolutely needs to be teased out before you go any further. Another element to this is surgical transitions. A lot of times, especially when you hedge towards like high fantasy narratives that draw on sort of like medieval-esque-ish culture, you don't have societies that are technologically advanced enough to execute complicated medical procedures without substantial risk to the person undergoing the procedure. This is where magic comes in. After all, it is fantasy, right? So you can either use magic to augment those medical procedures and make them safe and efficient and accessible, or you can elect to have your characters just magically transition. This is a whole spectrum too. You can have any combination thereof, as long as you are taking into account that characters should have the option to surgically transition if they're trans in your universe. The third element to this is non-medical transition. So do they have access to padding, packing, and binding? What do those look like? Are there specific garments designed for that purpose? Or is it something that is more cobbled together? So these three things, talking about hormones, medical intervention, talking about surgical intervention, and talking about non-medical, non-invasive transitioning. How accessible is that? That is a huge element of this world building process and absolutely something that needs to be discussed. The next element is language. So a lot of times, particularly in more like high fantasy-esque, more removed from our world today, fantasy narratives, there's a language issue. So it breaks the suspension of disbelief about a fantasy universe to throw in words like transgender, gay, etc. I do hear that. However, the way that authors often work around that is very problematic. They introduce their trans characters by misgendering them, by dead naming them, and by having, worst of all, the invariable scene where the character who is trans is found without their clothes, and the viewer is shocked to find that their expectation of a trans body does not meet what they had in their head. These are all terrible. Don't do them, please. They're not clever. They're not good plot devices. It's just sloppy world building. Now, in my Death and the Merchant series, what I did to work around this was I just created a different language system. So radiantly uncontained is their word for being trans. Ro is also a concept that they talk about, someone whose gender defies even what the gods could have imagined. Oh, the cat's very excited about this too. I hope you can hear him meowing. I'm gonna get some cat commentary in this as well. So that's one workaround. There's a lot of ways that you can think about introducing the concept of transness without actually being violent towards your trans characters. And that is what dead naming, misgendering, and showing them naked for the sake of a dramatic plot moment is it's being violent against your trans characters, and you just need to not. If that is the only way that you know how to introduce this, then it's time to go back to the drawing board, time to go back and take advantage of the wealth of information that is out there on the internet, and really learn more about trans culture in a more substantial way. Okay? So at the end of the day, this is really a world building issue. And that is the case really with all diverse representation, is Are you adequately putting the time and thought in to your world building? Are you actually being careful enough and doing your research and being expansive enough in your world building to accommodate a diverse cast of characters? By focusing on world building too, you're going to help with the risk of talking over trans people, because that's not what we want to do here. When people try to build inclusive narratives, there is a danger that they are going to just take that narrative and try and speak over a marginalized person instead of including diverse rep while also stepping back and making space for that person to tell their own story. Focusing on world building is a great way to prevent speaking over other people. Primarily because it allows you to look at people as more than just their label and more than just their identity. It does really force you to see them as human, or whatever race they are in your fantasy world. But you get the point that I'm trying to make. It really forces the issue of looking at them as a well-rounded being that has multiple sides to them other than just this two-dimensional label that you've smacked on in the name of just trying to cover your own ass, essentially. So, that being said, go forth, go build some really wonderful, diverse, inclusive worlds, and thank you for watching. Bye.